We got Mac and Mac, John McMullen Jody McDonald here on Bird 365. We got a hoodie-wearing Eagle fan to join us. He's not allowed to do that on camera. Have you ever worn a hoodie on camera, Scott Grayson?
That's a good question. No, I don't think I have.
Yeah. Well, you have now, technically.
Yeah, I can cross that off the list.
Yeah, technically. When are wheels up for you, Scott Grayson?
This evening. Head west this evening.
All right. Arizona, look out. Scott Grayson's going to be there tonight. Thanks for coming on early with us. Good to talk Super Bowl with you. You and I were at Super Bowl 52. Hopefully you recovered from that. And here we are back again. But, this is a pretty short span between Super Bowls, Scott. And you would think, oh, well, the Eagles are a pretty good team, pretty good organization. But everything's changed. Everything's changed. New coach, new quarterback. How impressive is this sort of run for the Eagles organization? Not just this year, but to be able to do it with Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz, Nick Foles. What do you think is the secret sauce of this organization?
I mean, it really is mind-boggling when you think about all the things that had to happen. You're right, John. I mean, the difference, this roster, and you put it next to the one from 2017, and virtually everybody is gone, which, as you said, is essentially unheard of, to be back 5 years later with a new quarterback, a new head coach, and you can just go down the list, and it's just everything is different. And to me, I mean, it's just shocking that not only are they here, but they're here and set up to be here for a while. And that, to me, is really the most impressive part of what Howie Roseman's been able to do. They brought in the right players this year on short deals to help get this team to where they needed to be. Injuries in the middle of the season, we hadn't seen them really do this before, but they go out and get in Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph. I mean, just bolstered up this defensive line. And now, they've got guys under contract, like 8 young players. We talked about 2017. I remember, John, you and I out there. This was an older roster.
Yeah.
And they were going to have to then, in the years after that, figure out how they're going to get younger. Well, they've done it. They've gotten younger. They've gotten more talented. They've got the right guys under contracts for the next few years. They don't have too much to have to deal with in terms of – they do have some tough decisions, don't get me wrong, in this offseason. But we're not worried about that right now. I'm just impressed, John, this team's not only set up to be a favorite in the Super Bowl this year, but to probably be back here a few more times, barring anything goofy and crazy going on, which can happen in this league.
All right, let me ask you about one of the key elements of this team, which is the head coach, Nick Sirianni. And I know you can't compare him to previous Eagle head coaches that have already had their entire story written. Andy Reid's, lengthy as it was, never got the dream ending, but a tremendous amount of success. Doug Peterson, the ultimate high, but then the downfall as well. Sirianni's still just riding the wave. So I'll ask you to compare them instead, if you can remember, how they were at this stage, closing in on the end of year 2, which is pretty damn comparable with Doug because we know it happened at the end of year 2. How does he match up with those other guys? For Eagles fans, in either confidence and or popularity, how do you compare going into this Super Bowl, Nick Sirianni against, say, Doug Peterson 5 years ago that you guys were just talking about?
It's a good question, and I would start with this and say that I think both guys have done an amazing job early on winning the locker room and getting the locker room to buy in, and then that chemistry just kind of steamrolls from there. These guys believe in Nick, I think, more than most fans or believe or even understand. These guys are willing to go to war for him in the worst way possible, and they love him. And I think Doug was very similar in that way. He had his leadership committee. He listened to his players. Anytime they brought concerns, he addressed them. When you have that kind of buy-in to your players, they're going to reciprocate and give you everything they have in return. And I think that's one thing Doug was able to do. I think Nick's done a good job of getting that too. Now, one difference is I feel like Doug had more respect nationally going into this game than it seems like. And I guess I'll get a better feel for this when I get out to Phoenix, that Nick does. I mean, there are players who lost to him in the playoffs who are just still ripping this team and ripping this coach, and they don't like it and all that. You know what? It's like everybody says, we're Philadelphia, nobody likes us, and we don't care. These players, I think, are rallying around their head coach very well, and I thought they did that pretty well back in 2017 as well. You don't see that with every coach. You don't see that in Dallas with Mike McCarthy, who I love to throw under the bus on this show every time I come on. You don't see that everywhere, and I think that's a key ingredient to success that sometimes is overlooked by front offices.
How much of that with Nick is his propensity to showboat when things are going well? Because I think a lot of it is when you talk about, I mean, think about the criticism. It's kind of silly, Scott, the fact that, well, you know, the Eagles are overrated. You know, they didn't play anybody. You always hear that narrative. And then you hear, oh, anybody could coach this team. They're so talented. Well, which one is it? It doesn't make any sense. So I can't get too up in arms about it. But how much is it people just don't like a head coach in the National Football League? You bring up Mike McCarthy. I always bring up Tom Landry to Jody. You know, the stoic guy. Bud Grant as well was like that. You're supposed to have decorum as a head coach in the National Football League. And Nick's there mugging for the camera. How much is it just that?
Well, there's no doubt that is what probably rubs people the wrong way. It's like he's your guy. You like when he does it. But if he's not your guy, you're kind of like, what is this fool doing? Yeah. And we heard back at the first press conference, and they're talking about, roots of plants and fertilizer, the lesson we got on gardening from Nick Sirianni. It's crazy how far he's come in 2 years because, everybody was like, who is this guy and what is he doing? And then he's mugging for the camera and he's doing all that. I think, John, what you talk about, and I think it's the perfect comparison between head coaches of the past versus today. To me, it's supposed to be a fun game. And I think that's one thing his players respond to as well. Nick, there's no doubt Nick has fun on that sideline. He is not the stoic guy who's going to stand there like a statue and act like he's a big student of the game in the middle of it, look like a big student of the game, studying his play sheets like Andy will throughout the game. Nick's up in everybody's faces. He's out there trying to motivate. I respect that. I like that, frankly. It's different, and I think different is sometimes good. And I think that's one thing that Nick has been able to get, out of his players is that ability to buy into how much fun he's having, and then they go and have fun. Would this team win with a more stoic coach? Maybe, but I also bring up that you get too much talent on one team. There's not enough footballs to go around. There's not enough, you start getting finger pointing. Now, there weren't losses this year that could have potentially led to some of that. But this team, with all its talent, never turned on itself. And he was able to keep this team with all its talent and to keep everybody happy, which I think is overlooked sometimes because you get all that talent and everybody wants to go get their sacks. They want to go get their receptions. They want to go get their touchdowns. And I think he did a great job of managing all of that as well. And again, I think sometimes that is overlooked, whereas other coaches would have a problem in a locker room with not enough footballs. He managed to keep this group close the whole time.
Yeah. Two guys this year had meteoric rises for the Eagles, and that would be their head coach and their quarterback. We may have liked them both coming into the season. No one knew they were going to be able to achieve what they did achieve, and they're different. We're just talking about Sirianni being emotional on the sideline, bugging for the camera, screaming and yelling, but he handles his business off the field well. He's come a long way from that opening press conference, and is an I'd say borderline eloquent guy. That's not Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is zero pulse all the way across the board, between the lines, off the field, doesn't matter. Jalen Hurts is the same thing. He's not an up and down guy like Sirianni. So basically they're different, but they work well together. Why?
I think it is because they're different. I think they balance each other to a certain extent. We don't see Jalen behind the scenes. I think he's a guy who will have some fun. I think he's a guy who will have fun with his players behind the scenes. But when it's business time and it's time to go to work, you're right. You get Jalen Hurts, the businessman. He's out there to go help this team win a game. That's the business transaction he's looking for. Nick Sirianni is not afraid to be him and be himself all the time. He'll speak like himself. He'll act like himself, as we talked about. I think it works because they are different. And I think, it's funny. I remember sitting here with you guys just a few months ago when it was still warm and we were looking ahead to the season. And I said, Jalen Hurts is my biggest question mark. Bottom line. And I know I wasn't alone.
No.
And the fact they
well,
are where they
now
are.
you were alone because everybody's right in hindsight, Scott. But go ahead. Yes, you were
It's
correct.
just wild that you now feel confident they could win this game because of Jalen Hurts. How far he came in a short period of time. And why is that? Well, I think it's because he doesn't fly too high or too low in the moments that come throughout a season. He doesn't panic. He's always stoic. He has his guys behind his back. They are ready to run through a wall for him. I don't think you could say that about a lot of quarterbacks in this league because of their personalities or how much they may make it about them. He's not. I mean, and then you look at Nick Sirianni. And so here you have Jalen Hurts, who's just a film rat, right? Wants to come in the building all the time. And Nick Sirianni is willing to meet him. It might be a Monday and he wants to go home and be with his family. But if Jalen Hurts says, let's go look at some film, Nick comes in and meets them there, and they make sure they take care of the business. I think they balance each other very well. So when you talk about having a good head coach that relates to his team, I think it's also very, very hard to find a good head coach that balances his quarterback and vice versa, like these two do.
Yeah, and I think those two always say, sons of football coaches, they have that in common. So even though, there's a bunch of stuff that they don't have in common, the fact that they both grew up in it, it's both almost ingrained in them, I think is a big part of their relationship. Last one on Nick, Scott, because this has happened twice in the past week. Last night, Brandon Graham said, I believe, Nick makes football fun for us. Last week, I was talking to Jason Kelsey in the locker room. We're talking about retirement. We always talk about retirement. And he's like, I'd already be retired if Nick wasn't here because of the shift in practice schedule, the lighter work, the maintenance days, all that kind of stuff, which, let's be honest, this team, we all looked at him and said, oh, they're going an hour and 15 today. Long day. By the way, I love Nick Sirianni because I don't got to sit out there in training camp for 2.5 hours. And it's worked. They're relatively healthy. They're healthier than Kansas City. They're as healthy as you could be. How much is this ball? And by the way, I don't want to give it all to Nick because that's an organizational philosophy. So Howie deserves credit, the sports science people, all that kind of stuff. But how I call it the Bill Jackson effect. You kind of alluded to it before. It's tough to make everybody happy, especially when you have an all-star team. We all laughed at Miles Sanders. Hey, this is an all-star team. Guess what? They were pretty stinking close. Of their 22 starters, 18 of them got some kind of postseason accolade. They made a run at this as an all-star team. How important is that balancing act?
Well, like I said, I think it's extremely important. If you're not able to keep everybody happy and the fingers start pointing, you've been through covering teams in the past where it just starts to break apart the foundation of the team. And then when the going gets tough and they really need to bond together to get through some adversity, maybe the Colts game, they're not able to do it. And this team was. I think you bring up some good points about, we did. I mean, it's like an hour. You're right, an hour and 15-minute practice in training camp. And we're all used to we're all old enough here that it's like, oh, they're 3 a days, and you got to go out there and knock each other around, and we criticized it. We were like, how are they going to be ready for the season when they went out and won their first 8 games, 9 games, something like that.
Yeah.
It works. You're right. And I think it's a very good point you bring up about your conversation with Jason Kelsey. I feel like for at least 5 years now, that's the question this time of year. Jason, are you retiring? And he keeps coming back. And I frankly expected him to last year because you just didn't see this coming in this team. Now, maybe he did. And maybe he did out of Nick and Jalen. But I was like, he's coming back for what? I don't know that this team's really geared up to do more than maybe get back to the playoffs. But, to his credit, he's been a big anchor, a big foundation. He's solidified his Hall of Fame candidacy, even more. And I think, you're right. I think players really do love what Nick and his younger staff are bringing to what was, quote, the grind. And it really has allowed some of these guys who are older, who maybe a decade ago would have never been able to get through a season. And they are. How many times on the injury report do they hold guys out? Even this past week, resting player.
Rest all year. Same
they
thing.
Value their rest. The players respect that. And when you're feeling a little bit better, you can go out there and give 100% a little bit, I guess, more easily. And I guess we'll find out how well that works on Sunday.
All right, Scotty, I am going on the record now and saying I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not predicting this. I'm just putting it out there as
All right. That means I'm going to get people pissed off. That's what that
hypothetical scenario, because it's kind of a fact. The Kansas City Chiefs, specifically Patrick Mahomes, this year and previous years, more importantly, this past year, had a couple of really nice come-from-behind victories. Had to rally both games against the Chargers. They were losing late. They were losing the AFC Championship game and got a late field goal when it was tied just to get themselves into a position to win and go back to a Super Bowl. Been there, done that. Patrick Mahomes has had plenty of that. The last time the Eagles rallied for a victory was week 10 against the Colts. They were losing that game out in Indianapolis and came back in the fourth quarter. Good job by them. That's a long time ago. The Eagles haven't had to come from behind. Now, that's a good thing because they're almost always ahead. But they haven't shown the ability to down 2 scores heading into the fourth quarter to be able to march it down the field when they need to, then get the big stop, then march it down the field again. Can the Eagles come from behind if they have to in this game? I don't think that's the way it's going to go, but if it does, are they capable of doing that against this Kansas City defense?
Yeah, I'm a believer, Jody, and it does help to have gone and survived adversity. And you're right, you can't say the Eagles haven't, but it has been quite a while since they've had to do it. I think, though, for the reasons that we stated, they have the belief in the quarterback, they have the belief in the head coach. I think this team is built to be able to come back. They have the leadership on both sides of the ball to be able to keep that team and that side of the ball focused. I think that they have the ability to come back. Now, if you stop and look at it, well, why haven't they had to? I mean, they've just been so good in the first half that they've been able to build up leads. And I think, nobody's sitting here going, boy, I wish they weren't so good in the first half so they could have gotten through a little bit more adversity.
Oh, I get those calls on
I
WIP.
get it all the time. They are, Scott.
Doesn't make any sense, but you get them.
Yeah.
But you're right. They haven't had to do it. And there's going to be no bigger stage, no bigger spotlight, no bigger, amount of pressure that this team would have to do it in than here on Sunday out there in Arizona. And you're right. The Chiefs have been through that. They'll stay calm, cool, and collected to get through that if it does face them. But I think for those reasons, I'm not of the reasons I'm concerned this team could lose the game, the Eagles, that's not one of them.
Okay,
I'm not afraid that they wouldn't be able to push the ball down the field, 75 yards in, 5 minutes to take the lead. I think they're built personality-wise to be able to monitor and handle those situations.
Well, I want to hear what you're worried about, but before we get to that, Scott, I kind of want to talk about that narrative. It's sort of, this team has been like a trope buster. I like to call them. They, Jody's right. We hear from people all the time, well, they got to face some adversity. Why? If you're better, the other team just beat them. And we hear all the time about they haven't played anybody. This is going to be the first team in NFL history. They're 60 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl, not having played anybody. And I joke, it's not that they haven't played anybody. It's they turned somebody's into nobodies. And that's a good thing. And then identity. Identity is a big thing with football reporters and TV guys like you. And we're always talking about identity. People ask me, what's this Eagles identity? I don't know. They don't have one because they can beat you all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
Isn't that better?
Yeah.
They can overcome adversity. They can just go out and dominate people. Isn't that better?
It's if you look through the schedule, and number one, I'll just say yes. It should be better. I mean, if you can go out and bully anybody any way you want, and you want to let them say, and I think the Eagles do this to an extent in the first quarter sometimes, how do you want us to beat you today? And then the other team shows their cards on what they're trying to take away. And then I think the Eagles say, okay, we'll just go and do this, this, and this, and we're going to just pound you. And I think that's why the second quarters have been so phenomenal sometimes, is because they dial in on a plan and a method after they see what the opponent is trying to do to them. And they say, fine, we'll beat you this way then. And, you're right. I think it's a great problem it's not even a problem. It's a great identity, if you want to call it one, is that they don't have an identity. They can beat you any way they want. They can beat you with their defense. And I think the defense is going to be a big reason why they potentially win this game. This pass rush is unreal. And you see it with these quarterbacks who the scouting report says these guys can get a lot of sacks. So you think the quarterbacks are going to be watching and ready to get the ball out of their hands fast. But despite knowing that, the closing speed of Hassan Reddick has been phenomenal to watch. The guy can get to you in 2 steps and cover a ton of ground, so much more than I think any of these quarterbacks are expecting. Josh Sweat's speed up the field. The exit out the back of the pocket is closed quickly by these guys, which is why then they can come funnel up the middle with the rest of the group, and you got nowhere to go. And so then you take a Patrick Mahomes with this ankle, and you say, okay, well, where is his ankle at? Because frankly, he moved around a lot better in the AFC Championship game than I expected.
Yeah.
But where is it at? We're going to find out, and this Eagles team is going to be able to get to him. But I think this defense can be the reason they win this game. Can the offense be the reason they win this? Sure. Jalen Hurts could throw over 300 yards in this game. I think there's some matchups out there that can be won for him. But I think this defense is going to be the reason why they win this game. But they can win so many different ways, to your point. Whereas you look at the Chiefs and you say, how are they going to win this game? Well, they're probably going to have to win a shootout. So that puts it all on the offense. There's the identity. So I think it's a great question. It's a great way to look back, and you wonder over the test of time and years later, how will we view this Eagles team? And I know whether they win or lose this game is going to go a long way towards that. But I don't know if everybody truly realizes just how good and how solid this team. I know you guys have been saying it on this show. They are loaded. They have the best roster. But stop and really appreciate what we've got, because we only got it for a few more days. And through the cycle of the NFL, there's going to be a different locker room here next year, and it'll be over. And so I think it's fascinating to watch.
We know the Eagles are going to put pressure on Mahomes because they put pressure on everybody. They've done it all year long. How many sacks is that going to add up? We'll find that out on Sunday. But they will be there, and I think Jonathan Gannon will get there with his 4, as he has all year. He's not going to be blitzing. It would be foolish to blitz because Mahomes is the best blitz pickup quarterback in the National Football League. Why go down that road? So I don't think Gannon will. But what's he going to do on the back end? He is a defensive, let's play zone, quarters, just let him dump the ball underneath. We'll keep him from going the long field. With Mahomes, you can do that. And then like 5 plays later and 2 minutes off the clock, they're in the end zone.
Right.
If there is going to be an adjustment, if Jonathan Gannon's going to change anything, my guess would be it would be in coverage, and maybe plays a little bit more man, maybe gets a little bit more aggressive and gets up on wide receivers coming out of there off the line of scrimmage. You think we got any chance for this, or is Jonathan Gannon, who's done, he is the defensive coordinator of a team that's 16-3. Folks, check this, check the record, 16-3. He's the DC, number 2 defense in the league. Is he going to change it all going into this game, or does he say, we'll do what we've done all year long?
Coaches tend to do what they've done all year long. But I agree with you. If you sit in a zone, Mahomes will pick you apart. I just don't think that's the way to attack this team for various reasons. You got the pass rush coming, so these guys shouldn't have to cover for long on the corners. The wide receivers for the Chiefs are a little banged up, so they're not going to be getting out there at 100%. And there's frankly nobody out there that I'm afraid Slay or Bradbury wouldn't be able to hang with. Kelsey's the one. Kelsey's the one guy I look at and say he could cripple you because he's that capable and he's that much of a mismatch. And I'm looking at it going, listen, I've got Avonte Maddox and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I'm putting both those guys on Kelsey. I want one in front of him. I want one behind him. And I want my corners to go do what they do. And I think Slay and Bradbury would thrive in that situation in this game. And you're just trying to keep the window to hit to Travis Kelce small. That's the way I would go about it. Now, and I will say, growing up, I grew up with the Jim Johnson defense. So my first impression of defensive football was, yes, go send extra guys, go get them. But this defense, you have to give Jonathan Gannon credit, man. If you can get there with 4, and you can have more guys in the back to make smaller windows for him to throw through, you can create mistakes. Why do you need to send an extra guy? So I have swung all the way around to, I can appreciate what this defense does with 4 guys and create smaller windows to throw through in the back. But you're right. It's going to be an interesting question to watch early on. Do they sit in zones? And I'm okay with mixing it up. You want to try to confuse a quarterback a little bit, sure. I mean, don't sit in the same thing all game long, but not the soft zones. I can't stand the soft zones. And I think in this game, you want to make Mahomes try to thread that needle as much as possible while dealing with the pressure and in the back of his mind, that high ankle sprain. All that I think is going to try to be what you do to help get him to create a mistake. And I think he will give you one if you can get there.
All right. At S Grayson, Box 29. Follow Scott on Twitter, the host of Props and Locks on Box 29. Are you doing that live from Phoenix while you're out there? Props and Locks?
We did our Super Bowl show last Friday because we've got all kinds of other Eagles coverage that they're doing in that time slot now this week. So we did all our Super Bowl props last week.
All right, so but you know where I'm going. I need a Super Bowl prop. First of all, you're a South Jersey guy, so how likely is it Isaiah Pacheco dooms the Philadelphia Eagles? And give me your best prop for Super Bowl 57.
I don't think Pacheco is going to backbreak the Eagles. The Eagles have done a good job stopping the run. Obviously, you're right; he's from Vineland. But I think he's proving himself to be an up-and-coming running back in this league. So he's definitely worth keeping an eye on. As far as the props that we threw out, that we went through in our whole show, the one I like the best, frankly, is something I was just talking about. Mahomes to throw one interception. And we had it last week at 0.5. It's at a half. So if he throws one interception in that game, you win. You telling me he's not going to throw one? Because here's the narrative you can look at as well. I think the Chiefs are going to have to come from behind to win this game.
Yeah.
So that means they're going to throw the ball more, and there's more chances.
Yeah.
So that's one that I think you can look at.
Yeah. Who's going to get it? CJ, Bradbury, Slay?
That's a good question. Mahomes is a kind of arrogant guy, and he's one of. I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to pick on Slay a little bit. It might be Slay, but I could see a scenario where it's CJ Gardner-Johnson, where he just kind of goes a little too high on a Travis Kelce pass over the middle. Maybe that's where you get it. But
center field, that's where you get a lot of it.
I've got and I don't know what you do when you get out there. John's not getting out there till later in the week. You're getting out there tomorrow. Will you have a chance? Will you even be given a chance to talk to a guy like Isaiah Pacheco? Because there's a question I'd love to ask him. What would he ask Mike Trouty if he had a chance to hang with him this week? Two Vineland guys. Pacheco's a homeboy, but we know how big a fan Mike Trout is of the Philadelphia Eagles. So is Mike Trout torn at all this week? Can he try and do the straddle the fence thing and hope that Pacheco has a good game, but see if the Eagles win? If you get a chance to get Pacheco, just ask him what he thinks.
Yeah, I will
Mike
definitely
Trout
try
will be
to.
doing
I think that's
leading
a
up
great
to the
question.
game on Sunday. That should be fun. All right, I'm going to run a prop by you and see if you agree with me. This is one that I'm leaning toward playing. I've bought since the Eagles won, and I saw the way Jalen Hurts played. And again, the Eagles didn't have to do anything. So it was almost like kept under wraps, which played well if you wanted value. I think this is a big end one game. There is no next week. There is no future game. If Jalen Hurts is going to fall on his shoulder, so what? He's going to suck it up and play the rest of the game. He's going to have all off season to rest. I think that Sirianni's going to dial up a bunch of Jalen Hurts designated runs. And I've seen in a couple places range between 45.5 and 49.5 yards for Jalen Hurts. I was hoping for high 30s. It was mid 40s and almost up to 50. But I still think he's going over. What do you think about Jalen Hurts running the football in the Super Bowl?
That is a great question because if he was 100% healthy, I think it's a good play. But what you saw in the NFC Championship game was he was aware, and you're right, he's got nothing to worry about in terms of time to heal after this. But, of course, he doesn't want to get hurt during the game. What Jalen has done a lot is he'll get that first down and he'll slide. He'll go out of bounds. If he'll get 5 yards even and slide rather than take that hit in that NFC Championship game. And it went under in the NFC Championship game because of that. So
but he had the Super Bowl to worry about. There's no Super Bowl left. This is the Super Bowl, Scotty.
Right, and you're gonna leave it all on the line for your teammates. You're absolutely right, and so therefore that different. I agree with you. If it was in the high 30s, it's a lot more tempting. In mid 40s, it gets to be a little nerve wracking. But I think you're right. If he's trying to do something that the Chiefs are not expecting, it could be more of that RPO like they were running so well earlier in the season where, not so much an RPO as much as it is just, he's either handing it off or he's keeping it. And I think the Chiefs are going to bank on him not taking it. So there could be some alleys there. You could be right. That's not a bad one to play. Frankly, another one I like is going along the narrative I was talking earlier about the defense. I think Hassan Reddick has a good shot at being MVP.
Yeah, Hassan's having a great run. We'll see if he can finish it off. One thing is I think both head coaches want to lose the coin toss. I think they don't want to deal with that nonsense. And here's my one true lock, Scott Grayson. You can book this. Carl Cheppers will be enemy number 1 in one city on Monday. That is my lock of all locks. I guarantee that.
Yeah, I got you. I agree with you. I can definitely see that.
Unfortunately, you can't get that a bet, but I guarantee it.
Yeah.
They will have thousands of props out there. That will not be one of them.
Yeah, you can get the color of the Gatorade that goes on the coach, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff for sure.
Wonder if they will have color of the underwear worn by the halftime performance. We may actually get a chance to see that, which would be fun. Scotty Grayson, good stuff. Appreciate, as always, whenever you come on. Safe flight to Arizona. We're going to be talking to you during the off season, either be it leading up to a parade or after a parade or after Howie Roseman having to get to work re-signing this entire defense. We're going to get you on plenty, brother. Thanks for jumping in today.
No problem. I always appreciate it, guys. Take care.
That is
See you, Scott.
Scott Grayson from Fox 29 and the host of Props and Locks. They're so busy, they don't even have time for Props and Locks this week on Fox. They had to pre-shoot it a week out. Come on. This is big stuff. There could be changing markets.
Yeah, well, the Super Bowl is kind of a big deal, so you do a lot of preparation leading up to it. But yeah, I wish I could get the official, the referee being screwing one city. That's a guarantee.
The
so
foregone conclusion since the NFL is fixed. Didn't you know that, John?
Scripted. Much like WWE, scripted
and or fixed.
Yeah.
And if you're an Eagle fan and you believe that's a case and it's scripted for the Eagles to win, I guess you're okay with it.
Yeah.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We'll come back. A couple more things I want to run by Johnny Mac. A little later, about 25 minutes from now, Jason Cole's going to join us. NFL longtime reporter, author, and Hall of Fame selector. One of the guys who will get a chance on Saturday to decide who is going to enter the hallowed halls of Canton. Jason Cole going to join us about 25 minutes. We need you to stay right here with us on Birds 365. Feel free to hit that like button. We'll be back after this break. Come on.